Oh, hey, coming up on today's show, Mike Kaeding, construction expert. If you thought Elon Musk was disrupting the world with SpaceX, you haven't met this guy, Mike Kaeding, Norhart, construction disruption. Coming up today, live in the lab with Keith Billis. Gotta get this thing on. I don't want him to miss me. I just don't want him to miss me.
Hi, I'm Keith Billis, and this is Live in the Lab. All right. A little bit of weirdness in front of the camera there for anybody who's watching. So I'm like, hey, where's the button? Where's the button? I can't get it going. How did you go viral on TikTok? You were on America's Got Talent. How much do you get paid to be on AGT? Oh, you didn't get paid. Keith and Steve here in Live in the Lab.
You're a great interviewer. I love it.
48 miles, 48 hours. And not just once. You ain't seen nothing yet. I hit 50 last time, and I'm like, yeah, things are a little different than they were 10 years ago. So trust me, things are to keep. You have no time for the BS that much of society seems to put on the table. Why is that? What you're talking about is real right now. There's just no bullshit here, but it's just real. We brought you in with some Marley. I said, Joseph, let's talk music for a second. We said, Keith, oldies, 60s, 70s, and 80s. I've never talked to a Serp before. Why are you a Serp? In many ways, we're the same story. I came from nothing. You came from nothing. I think the old saying goes that if you want a trophy, you climb Everest. If you want respect, you climb K2. I've built an AI myself, and it's pretty fascinating when you can have a conversation with yourself with your own knowledge. Have you done that before? Why are we rushing to make these tools if they're all they're going to do is hurt humanity? Does the world need an Oppenheimer moment with AI?
What a fun show.
So I'm late. Y'all want to know why your construction projects are over budget? I'm telling you, y'all want to know why. I thought I was here to talk about disruption today. I thought I was here to talk about the disruption of the construction industry, Business Athlete Nation. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to keep y'all waiting. I know you're all like, but Keith, I thought you had a construction expert. I thought you had an expert on the show. I thought you had a guy who was disrupting. Let me make sure I'm just be clear in the camera here. I thought you had a guy who was disrupting the construction industry. And I do. Oh, I do. You think Elon's disrupting the world? Coming up. I am privileged. I'm flattered. Very fortunate to be sitting in the chair next to me up on the screen over there. Mike Kaeding from Norhart. He wasn't late. Just took a couple seconds getting in the lab. I gave him the wrong combination. So he got stuck behind the lab door. I'm sure that's what the problem is. You know those construction guys, you give them the keys, you give them the locks, you just don't know which one to pull out. Like all these keys. I'm like, go digital. You got to go digital. Yeah, get rid of the keys. Don't need those keys anymore. Anyways, coming up soon, we got Mike Kaeding joining me here live in the lab. The monologue is going to be shortened because I suspect we don't have much time with this disruptive construction guy, Norhart, taking apart the apartment industry across America. I'm excited to sit down and talk with Mike here coming up shortly. But before we do that, I want to jump into a few things. Are you guys tuning into the morning show? Hey, Mike, I got a morning show. I can't invite you. You might be late. We get up at 6 a.m. every single day to start the show at 7 a.m. 7 a.m. Central Time. I get up at 4, but we start the show at 8 o'clock Eastern. We go for 2 hours on LinkedIn. We stream into LinkedIn, interact with the world's most awesome people on LinkedIn. We're on a mission. The mission is to create the world's largest conversation on LinkedIn, YouTube. Hell, if Mr. Beast gets up every single day with a mission of being the biggest YouTube creator, old Uncle Keith here, he's on a mission to build the Business Athlete Performance Lab into the greatest space for hybrid solo creators, anchored by the world's greatest talk show host. Hey, that's me. Yep, that's me. So we're on a mission to create the world's largest conversation, streaming into LinkedIn, streaming into YouTube, connecting people like Mike, people like myself, people like this awesome community that I just joined at Brand Built, ran by Nat Berman and Darren Mass. You want to connect with some pretty interesting, awesome creators that are shaking up the planet? You might want to check out Brand Built. So if I can sit at the center of that and just talk to people, hey, everybody, come talk to Uncle Keith. I'm going to create magic. And I'll tell you why. I only heard little bird telling me that LinkedIn's testing a TikTok feed. It's inevitable, isn't it? Video is inevitable. I wonder who's doing video. I am 2 hours a day. Oh, hey, what do you think of the construction jersey? Didn't want Mike to miss me. Even if he was late on the job, I just didn't want him to miss me. He's sitting patiently in the room over there. So get behind the camera. Get that video going. TikTok feed starting on LinkedIn. We can help you. I got an invite for you guys. I got an invite for you. I got an invite from Mike. Mike runs an awesome company called Norhart. I bet you Mike talks to his stakeholders frequently. He probably has employees. He probably has investors. He probably has awesome customers. He's probably talking to many people all the time. So I'm saying to Mike, I invite you to sit down and have a conversation with me. Let's create some great content together. Let's chop it up. Let's make it entertaining, informing, because I know you're not late. I know you're not. I know you deliver your projects on time. I know you like to have fun in amongst the hard work that you deliver. That's what we like to do here in the lab. We like to entertain and inform. You know what we like to do, nation. Entertain and inform. That's it. So I invite all of you business leaders, entrepreneurs, athletes, solopreneurs. You want to create great content? You want to get in that TikTok feed rumored to be happening here on LinkedIn? Come join me in the lab. Come create some shows. Come create some content. And here's the thing. Here is the thing. People go, what, Keith, why do you go live? I'll tell you why I go live, because I got to record it anyways. And I'm an expert in creating community. I'm an expert in creating conversation. I'm an expert in communicating with you. I'm an expert in sitting in the middle of people and bringing them together and chatting, having dialogue, creating a safe space. So let's do it live. Let's create dialogue. Let's record it, chop it up, distribute it, and have a wonderful conversation with the world. That's what we're doing here live in the lab, 7 days a week, noon Central Time on X, LinkedIn, YouTube, with some of the world's most interesting people like Mike Kaeding coming up, CEO of Norhart, disrupting the construction industry. And then Nicole Bernard and I are disrupting the mornings with the morning show, Mornings in the Lab. Come join us. All right, enough of me. Enough of me. I'm pretty jacked. Today was shoulders day. You feeling them shoulders? That's it. Shoulders, upper body, business athlete lifestyle. You got to get in the gym. Yeah, you got it. My mornings were disrupted by the morning show. They were. I'm like, okay, I got to fit that. My daughter's like, Dad, how are you going to fit the mornings? And I figured it out. All right, so we'll talk about that on another day. Right now, we're going to pivot our attention to Mike over there. And I don't think he knows what he got himself into. I don't think anybody. The secret's slowly getting out, though. People come like, Keith, I saw your show, and I don't know. They walk trepidly in the door. They show up. I'm like, yeah, why don't you come on in? Let's go have some fun. I'm like, let's go have some fun. Mike, let's have some fun.
Oh, I love it. Dude, I love your energy. This is going to be a blast.
Oh, yeah, we only have blasts. How's
awesome.
it going, man? How's it going?
Doing really well. Life's been good. How about for you?
All right, I got to ask you. So why were you late?
I logged into the wrong StreamYard link, apparently.
Oh, okay. Hey, you're a great communicator. You learn to pivot the conversation. I'll take some responsibility for that. We probably sent you the wrong one. I love your backdrop. Is that real or is that Memorex? Do you remember Memorex?
Real. We're construction people. What do you think? You think it's digital?
Oh, so you guys don't build in Roblox? I thought I was talking to a Roblox creator.
Oh my gosh, not at all. Real wood, steel, concrete. That's what we love.
Dude. I did a little bit of looking at Norhart, did a little bit of looking at Mike Kaeding, did a look at that last post. I'm like, I'm inspired by what you're trying to do because I'm trying to do the same thing. I'm trying to be disruptive. And I thought to myself, wow, what a great conversation on a Thursday with the guy who's sitting back in the construction industry, first principles thinking, looking at something, saying, okay, you guys did it a certain way this whole lifetime. Let's do it differently. And that's how you think, isn't it?
Absolutely. In fact, if you look at a lot of other industries like manufacturing, they've radically changed things over the last 60 years.
Yes.
But construction's been stagnant. So if we can just take some lessons from them and change the world ourselves, we can see meaningful improvement in our space. And that's what we're trying to do.
I love it. So before we get too far, Mike, I got to have the audience caring about you. I had a radio expert on my show a number of weeks back, and he said, Keith, you can't have the guest introduce themselves because they'll never do a good job introducing themselves. But I want to tell you something. I have a different point of view because I love my guests. And my guests, I think they feel the love from Uncle Keith. They know the entertain and inform stuff. So I'm going to give you the platform and maybe a timer, less than a minute, 30 seconds. Entertain my audience why they need to keep listening to old Uncle Keith sitting over here in the chair across the chair, Uncle Bapl, and Mike Kaeding, from Norhart. Why should they care about you? Why should they listen to what you have to say?
Simply put, I'm hoping to cut your rent or a mortgage payment by half.
Oh,
Think about how much that could radically change your life.
oh.
And we can do that through driving down the cost of construction, scaling up production. On the other hand, we've had some crazy ups and downs in our own experience. For example, my dad was actually kidnapped in Peru and we lost everything building this company growing up when I was young. We can dive into that story, which is a wild story. Or we can look at the ups and downs of our journey as we've hit some major roadblocks, right? If you want to change the world or do something different, you're going to get punched in the gut time and time again. Unless you're willing to go through that and deal with that and accept that failure, you're going to struggle along the way. So, if you want to hear how to make that success, how to drive down your cost of your housing cost, or just how to deal with these problems, like that's why you should stick around and listen to what we have to say.
I'm wondering where I go now. I'm like, okay, do I talk construction? Do I talk to kidnapped dad? But let's just even go further back.
Hmm.
You're an entrepreneur, you're a successful entrepreneur. Your dad was kidnapped. Where does the drive start, Mike? Was mom and dad in business earlier on, or did you grow up in a business family? Let's get right back to even before dad got kidnapped.
Yeah, so my parents originally started the business. My dad was actually really passionate about like hybrid cars. He was one of the first inventors of that. But when I was born, he realized he needed to make some real money and he thought he could do that in the real estate space. So he built up some small properties. And I remember growing up with that. I was helping out their swing hammers, pick up nails, sweep the floor. And I lived it. This was my summers growing up. There's pictures of me on a crib on a construction site. Not sure if that's entirely legal, but that was my life growing up. Then, of course, as I mentioned, we lost everything. My dad was kidnapped in Peru during that time. And eventually I went off to college. And when I realized during college, the one thing I knew is that I wanted nothing to do with the family business. And the reason that was deep down is that I didn't want people to think it was given to me. So I really had to wrestle with my own ego during that time. But what I really realized is that I wanted to make a meaningful, positive impact in the world. And I knew we could do that by taking my parents' small business, scaling that up to have the impact of driving down your housing costs. And that's where things started taking off.
No, how old are you when you had that realization?
I was about 22.
Yes. And how old were you when dad was kidnapped?
I was like 12.
So you're 12 years old. You are living where in America?
Yeah, in Minnesota.
You're living, oh, hey, I'm in Manitoba. I'm just up the road.
Hey, I like it.
I knew I could relate to you. Where in Minnesota are you?
The Twin Cities.
Ah, okay. I'm literally just up the road. I'm just up the 93 to 6 hours north. I'm like, hey, there's Uncle Keith over there, Chief Bapl Business Athlete Performance Lab with Shaking Mike. So you're 12 years old. You and your mom are at home, I'm going to suspect.
Yes.
And who makes the phone call to say dad's been kidnapped?
Huh, we didn't know that it got until he got back. So
Oh,
what had happened is that my parents were very philanthropic and they were supporting the Special Olympics, which happened to be in Minnesota that year. They actually held a place for the parents to come stay when their kids came to compete in the Special Olympics. And one of the families that my parents got to know, the father of that family, his name was Pancho. They built this
yeah.
great relationship over the course of 9 months. It was amazing. And at some point, it started to turn to this idea of maybe we could help Pancho's native country, Peru, because at the time there was not very good public transportation. So they thought, okay, we can help him. We'll purchase some buses, send them down to Peru. Pancho will monitor and manage that bus system and send us back some money so we can cover the cost of those buses. That all sounded great until, well, Pancho got the buses and he started paying the payments back until he stopped and he stopped making those payments. So my dad started making frequent flights down to Peru to work through all of this. And eventually it went to court. It went all the way to the Peruvian Supreme Court where there was some corruption. That's another side story. But one of the times that my dad was down there, he was walking along the beach when all of a sudden someone came running up to him and said, "You're from America, aren't you? Tell me all about what it's like in America. What do you do? What do you see? What do you feel?" And then as fast as he showed up, he ran off. My dad thought, "This is odd." Anyway, he just kept walking until all of a sudden, two uniformed police officers stopped him. And they said, "Do you know that man you were talking to? Well, he's a known drug dealer, and now you need to come with us downtown to be questioned." My dad went with the police officers and went to their police car where they were greeted by another two officers, so four in total, into this small little car. My dad felt was something was a little off, but the moment he got in the car, he recognized that they were not real police officers. So small two-door car, two
Yeah.
people in front, two people in back. He's stuck in the back middle, squished between men, and they start asking him for money. They start opening up his shoe, looking to make sure there's nothing in there, nothing in his pockets. No, I don't have any money, nothing on me. And he looked like the kind of guy that you wanted to mug. He looked like an American who had some money that maybe didn't have all of his wits together. So he'd actually been mugged once before. In that prior time, he learned one important lesson. And that is that you have about 1 second before people realize what you're doing. So you have 1 second to act. So he started formulating this plan in his mind. And as they started heading to the bad part of town, he was really waiting for them to slow down to 15 miles an hour at a stoplight. So they're going 55, 50, 40, 30, 20, 15. And that's the moment he does his plan. He jumps up from the middle seat, reaches across the passenger in the passenger seat, opens up the door, uses the slowing car's momentum to whip open that door and pull him out of the car where he ran backwards down traffic to escape. And that's the story of my dad being kidnapped in Peru.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So then, when did you and mom learn of dad being kidnapped, and how did he just, there's no cell phones, mobile phones back in that day. So was dad getting back to the hotel and dad saying, "Hey son, hey, Mrs. Keating, I've just been kidnapped, but I'm okay"?
She got back to the hotel and just shook and decided not to call my mom because he didn't want to scare her. So when he arrived back in America, that's when we found out. Although my mom had a sixth sense for things, and she was pretty nervous that weekend, and she was hoping nothing bad was happening, but had a sense that maybe something was. And when she heard the story, she could not believe it.
What do you think was the plan for the intention of the kidnappers, or what did your father think was the intention of the kidnappers in that situation, Mike?
That's such a good question that I don't have a great answer to, but the best we can think at this time is they were hoping to kidnap him and then try to call us, his family, for some level of ransom
Mhm,
to get him back.
mhm. Not uncommon, really, is that?
No, it's much more common than you expect. And there's whole teams of people devoted just to negotiating with those kind of hostage takers.
It's much more common than you expect. Have you, so as a CEO of a large company, have ever had to consider things such as that?
So whenever we travel abroad, there's certain precautions we take, and it depends on the place that we look at. But in some cases, we will have armed drivers driving the cars. In some cases, we'll look at just flying in via helicopter to the site that we're going to.
Mhm,
We certainly take the recommendations of the State Department very
mhm,
seriously.
mhm.
And before we even go, we've got people on the ground that know our itinerary, what we're doing, and we make sure that things are protected that way. But there certainly is risk, and that is a very real fear that I think about because I would be a hostage or a target for that kind of thing.
You would be, yeah, for sure, you would be a target for that kind of thing. Does it scare you?
Oh, it terrifies me. Yeah, I do not want to be kidnapped at all. And in fact, I probably would take more trips to overseas sites if that fear wasn't there.
So dad's kidnapped, comes eventually, mom knows, son learns about it. What take me through life post kidnapping. And you're going from 12 on your way to in your early 20s and realizing that you don't want to build a business on the perception that somebody's handed it to you.
Yeah.
So what happens in those 10 years post dad being kidnapped, you growing up, watching dad continue to build business, successful business, you're completing high school, post-secondary, Mike?
Yes. Went off to college.
Yeah. So you're finishing all that. Then the lights start to brew in the early 20s.
Yeah. So I went off to college for computer science, mathematics, and management. And I really wanted to do something that kind of changed the world. And I thought that's going to be in software or AI or finance or consulting, somewhere in that spectrum of things. But during that time, my dad really wanted to work with his son. He'd built up this business. And what is my dad going to do with this small business if his son doesn't get involved? And so I I really did wrestle with my own ego substantially there because I didn't want people to think this thing was given to me. But what I realized is that I should take advantage of the unfair opportunities that we have in front of us because my real dream is about making the most meaningful impact I can in the world. And if I get a 15-year head start starting with a small business rather than scratch, I can have 15 more years to grow this business to have a bigger impact on the world. So I gave up my ego in lieu of trying to make that bigger impact. And then once I did that, my dad and I were like two peas in a pod. We really worked well together. It was a ton of fun. And within just a few years, just 4 years, my dad unexpectedly passed away. In
Oh.
fact, I remember one day where I got this call from our bank. And the bank said, Mike, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your checks to your employees are about to bounce. I was like, that doesn't make sense. We've never missed a payment to anyone ever. What's going on? We dug into it and we realized that my dad had moved the money to the wrong bank account.
Oh,
So it
no.
was an easy transfer, just move it to the right bank account. And I call up my dad and bring my dad back to the office where we're going to have him write a check to move the money over. But oddly enough, he couldn't write the check, couldn't write anything on there, and
Mhm.
only could hardly sign his name. So I filled out the check for him, but we knew something was off. So that night we went home with him to my mom's house and my parents' house and just sat with them, had dinner with them. And my dad seemed quiet, but we had nothing to really say that there was something seriously wrong. So we went home that night and I woke up that next morning to a frantic phone call. My mom was calling saying that there was something seriously wrong with my dad and that he was refusing to go to the hospital. I went to my parents' house as fast as I could, got there, and clearly my dad was not himself. He was half brain dead in a way. And I pled with him to go to the hospital. And at that moment, he agreed to go. And I remember at this point stepping into my parents' pantry and bawling because I knew in this moment, this was probably the last time I'd ever really see my dad.
Mhm.
So he hopped in the car with my mom to go to the hospital. They raced him down to the University of Minnesota because it turned out that he had a stroke that was caused by a brain tumor. They did emergency surgery that night. He did end up living, but he was just a vegetable. He wasn't a real person after that. He lived for 6 months before actually passing away. But not only was it tough because I had just lost my dad, but literally overnight, I now became CEO of this company.
Talk about that next morning. I'm as much not looking for a response, but as much just throwing the thought out rhetorically. The conversations we have here in the lab with Business Athlete Nation are conversations that are are driven to inspire, motivate, help people accountable, help them move forward, take the next step in life. And we all have our journeys. The journey you have gone through, having a father that was kidnapped, looking in your own mirror, not wanting to have success handed to you, wanting to do it all by yourself, which you then did, and then waking up. I'll use the metaphor on a Monday. All of what you didn't want, yet you had, is now gone. Dad's gone. You're now thrust into being the man. Mike's the man. Everybody's looking to Mike, right? How long did that process take for you to transition, for you to become the man? I'll use that in air quotes to those that are listening jokingly, because you know how it's funny. My wife and I were talking, I show love through teasing. It's just how I show affection. It's like how when I start the show, and when you were late, I'm like, all right, this is going to be fun because I can have, because that's how humans connect, man, with laughter and love, right? So for you to be able to share your story, which I'm really grateful for, up for the last 30 minutes, which gets us here. Now I understand why you're on the mission you're on. Now I understand why you're like, I'm out to disrupt the construction industry. I'm out to do things differently, because you've had to see things differently at a young age for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about how it's a metaphor the Monday after. For me, it was literally the Monday after,
Literally.
walking into the office and then becoming the CEO. I was the one in charge, but I didn't take the title.
Yeah.
In part, I didn't take the title because I didn't feel I was ready. And
Mhm.
in fact, there's many others around me who felt the same way. At this time, we were getting approval to do a brand new apartment building. It was called Emberwood Apartments. And I didn't understand the importance of building relationships with city council members and connecting with them. And so there was this distance that unfortunately I'm at fault for. And because of that, they didn't entirely trust me. They weren't entirely sure I would be able to execute the way that I said. And they did give us permission to move forward, but they ended up shutting me down twice. And
Mhm.
the second time they shut us down, I'll never forget this. They pulled me into the city offices, sat me down and my team, and said, Mike, we don't believe you can do this. You have to hire someone else to manage this construction.
Mm.
And talk about, I wasn't sure I could do this. And now there's someone of authority looking me in the eye and saying, you're not good enough.
Confirming what you're privately believing.
Yes, exactly. How hard that is. And so we ended up having to find someone, which we were shut down until we found someone. So we found someone in 3 days that had the resume, but that is no way to find a good construction manager. And so that was its own bit of a debacle, but he was enough to keep the city at bay, where we did all the work behind the scenes. Then I remember about a month or two before we were supposed to open, we had a water main test. This pipe buried 15 feet in the ground that was over 1,000 feet long. And that test failed. In fact, it indicated there was some kind of pinhole water leak somewhere in this large water main, but it didn't tell us where. So my excavator at this time wanted nothing more than to leave the site. He had other jobs to work on. So I stood out there in my fairly nice clothes, working with him side by side from sunrise to sunset, digging through the mud, looking for this pinhole water leak. Eventually, we find it after weeks and patch that hole. And then I remember the city showing up just a few days before we were supposed to open. And they look at our site and they said, there's no way. There's no way we're letting you open this building on time. And I thought, dude, I have families that are supposed to move in just a
Yeah.
couple of days. What am I supposed to do? So we worked long through those nights. It was insane. And then I remember the very last day. It was a half day inspection with about a half a dozen city inspectors. They looked at every nook and cranny of that building. And I remember at the end, the head building official pulling me aside in the parking garage. And I can remember this as if it was yesterday. And he said, Mike, I know we were hard on you, but honestly, looking at this building today, this is the nicest project we've opened in this city. I was like, and I would say for me, that was the moment I went from just filling the shoes of a CEO to actually feeling like I could actually do it.
Do you look at that project, Mike, as was that your legacy project? Was that your dad's legacy project? Did those thoughts ever cross your mind as on the personal side of things? Or perhaps the third choice is no, Keith, it was just a job that I had to get done because I had to prove to everybody that I could get the job done.
That's certainly the first project that I had ever done without my dad because my dad had passed away. But it there was really no choice because unless I execute on this project, I'm laying off my staff. So I've got to go forward. I got to take step after step. Like I can't take the easy route out. Otherwise, everything that's been built up will be lost.
No choice.
Yeah.
No choice. So you're on your way. You complete your first project. At what age are you at that point, Mike?
26 or
Yeah.
so.
So you're managing $100 million plus construction projects, multi-$100 million plus construction projects, I'm going to assume.
That time it wasn't that big, but today that's where we're at.
Yes. Yeah. So you started there and then continued to grow.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I'm going to suspect that the old saying, confidence comes from successfully achieving little milestones along the way. So not only did that, you go from one project to the next one to the next one, solving problems here and there as every good entrepreneur. And you wake up today literally disrupting the world with Norhart. Would that be the best way for me to phrase that for you?
Yeah. And what's interesting is each step of the way, you're always doing something new because as you
Yes.
scale up, we grew about 10 times the size in a number of years after that point. And every time you get to another level of scale, you hit new challenges. And these challenges aren't little, there's like giant punch guts. Like today, I look back and building Emberwood Apartments, honestly, that feels easy. At the time, it was super hard, right? It was a super big struggle. It was something I'd never done before. But every step of our journey now, it's a new challenge. It's something crazy. It's a whole new world, something I've never done before. And I think the most important lesson in that I've seen is that if you want to change the world, you need to be comfortable in failure. See, anytime someone starts something new, you're terrible at it. And as kids, we don't care, right? We can't ride a bike, we can't talk, we can't walk. Like these are things we learn and we grow, and it's just normal. But as an adult, there's something in us that shifts, that thinks, now I'm an adult, now I'm a professional. I better have my act put together. But that that's not the right approach. The reality is you've got to be okay in failure, recognizing that you got to grow and improve, but be okay that you're going to struggle with things at first. That's just part of the process and part of that growth.
Do you think that a 20-year-old entrepreneur, you're having more success than a 40 or 50 or 60-year-old because you have less fear? You're more naive. You're just more all in. You're all about risk. You're less risk adverse. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, there is I would say, a huge advantage and a disadvantage with that. Oftentimes, I talk about part of the reason we were able to disrupt this industry and do many new things is
Mhm,
because I was very ignorant really to the way things are actually done in the overall market. I understood how my dad did it,
mhm,
but I didn't understand how the big companies always did things. And so we would do things that were radically different than they would even consider trying. And that enabled success for us. But I also didn't understand the fear or the challenge of how hard those other things really would be. So as you get older, that skill and knowledge is an asset because it can help guide you,
mhm,
but it also can hinder you because you may not take the risks that you would when you're younger because you just don't understand how hard it really is.
mhm, mhm. We're 42 minutes into our conversation, and I'm really enjoying the pace of it because I've gotten to a point where I've got a good foundation where you came from, good foundation for what's happened in your life. As I did my little pre-show research on Mike, struck by the words like disruption, struck by the words of, if you think SpaceX, and I even teased about it in my openers, right? SpaceX is disrupting space exploration. And you are very much embracing the role of disrupting the construction industry. Talk about that mission, that purpose, getting out of bed, going and asking questions. And I'm emphasizing this and I'm asking this because I don't think myself personally, enough entrepreneurs push like you're clearly trying to push, like maybe I'm trying to push. And it sometimes doesn't even need to be that complicated. I'll call out, hey, Shannon Houchin, if you're listening right now, Mike, Shannon Houchin starts a peach stand selling peaches in I think in Georgia. She goes from selling one peach stand to 100 plus peach stands around America, multi-million-dollar business, disrupting, thinking about doing things differently. So talk about that, because you're clearly passionate about the disruption, about coming into a room with your colleagues. And what are your colleagues looking at you saying, yeah, but Mike, we can't do it that way? Because I think your response is probably, have you looked at it differently? Or what do you say to somebody who says that to you, Mike?
That's a great point. The core, what I say is that's not acceptable. I hate that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
It's something we talk about our orientation. I don't care the way it's always been done. We should go back to first principles, understand the constraints, and act in the best way possible.
Mhm.
For me, since my dad died young, it really reminded me how short life really is.
Hmm.
We only live about 10 or 5,000 weeks or 5,000 weeks here on earth. And it really reminds me how precious that is.
Hmm.
And for me, I want to be careful to make sure I'm spending the minutes I have here on earth. And so for me, a big part about that is making a meaningful, positive impact in the world. Like I've already gotten to the point years ago where I could just retire for the rest of my life and sit on a beach. But who cares? Who cares how many $100 bills they're going to shovel onto your grave?
Hmm.
I care much more about that long term impact. But you posed a really interesting question, though, about employees asking that they should do things the way they've always done them.
Hmm.
And that really goes to something that I think has become the most important lesson that I've ever learned and the key to making all of this work. And that is to hire the best people. And,
Yes.
and when I say the best people, I don't, this isn't just some phrase. We truly mean the best. In fact, we will fly people in from other states to come work during the week and fly them home on the weekend. One of our staff members in 2007, Steve Jobs announces the brand new iPhone, right? The first one that ever came out. He walks off stage, and our employee walks on that same stage following Steve Jobs' announcement. It's that kind of caliber of person. And when you bring those caliber of people together, they don't ask you, we should, they don't propose keeping the way things have always been done. But even more than that, they change things.
Hmm.
They unlock doors that you didn't know could be unlocked. They make the world better. Now, most people at this point, including my older self, will look at me and say, Mike, that sounds expensive. And they're right if you look at it on a cost per person basis. We pay top of market salaries. We give Google like benefits, including unlimited pay time off to our construction workers. Sounds expensive, right? But what most people fail to understand is that the best people outperform the average by 2 to 5 to even 10 times as much. And so, if you look at it at a cost per unit produced, they're not your most expensive. They're your least expensive. So for those who feel that can't afford to hire the best, my answer is simply you can't afford not to.
So simple, Mike. So simple. So clearly you have to come back for show number 2 to talk about this topic alone, because I am drinking your Kool-Aid so much. I'm all about, if I was to role play with you and we were employee and you were my employee and I was your boss, I'd be like, hey, Mike, so Rule number one today, you got to take care of yourself first. Once yourself's taken care of, then take care of your family, your kids, all that circle, and then get to me. But if you don't get taken, so don't worry about me until you get that taken care of. You're like, well, what? But Keith, you're my job. No, but I need you around for a long time, make big decisions, and I need you around for a long time. So if you're not taking care of yourself and your family and your circle, then I ain't going to have the privilege of having you around for a long time. So please take care of yourself and just do everything possible. And then when you're done, because I believe, Mike, that you inherently really want to do well.
Mm.
You're like, oh yeah, I really want to do well. I want to do awesome. And I want somebody to support me to do well. Okay, then I have your best interest as a human being to do. You probably have my best interest in a human being to do well. Now we're connected, right? Now magic happens. Isn't that true?
Yeah, you get it. You so get it. That's exactly what we work to do. We often say that if the employee does all they can to support the company, does all they can to support the employee, that's where magic happens. If
Yeah.
either one of them fall back, then it fails.
But and it's an ongoing thing from both sides.
Yes.
And it takes implicit trust and it takes a focus on results. I really believe that. And you clearly spend time at Norhart, spending the time to find the right human being, putting them in the right spot. And then I'm going to believe probably if the human being doesn't succeed, I bet you guys take all the responsibility because you didn't put enough time in and you didn't make the right decision. It wasn't the human being's fault, unless they did something negligible. But you're probably the kind of employer that it's, okay, Keith didn't work out. We must have just made the wrong decision in our hiring process. We're going to help Keith on to his next journey. I bet you that's how you guys operate.
Oh, absolutely. We give generous severance for people that we have to let go. We help them find other jobs. We have employees that we've had to let go that have come back and thanked us because the core of it is just it was a misalignment. They were in a role that they didn't enjoy and they couldn't be the best in the world at. We helped them find a role that they could really enjoy and then maximize their skill set, and they were better off for it.
Mm-hmm. So where do we sit here today, Mike, in front of the world? We're a few minutes left in our conversation. Talk a little bit about Norhart and talk about the impact it's having on the world, the disruption you guys are having in the construction industry. Paint me a picture, paint Business Athlete Nation a picture.
Yeah, so what we're looking to go next over the next decade is to reach about 192,000 units under management with a 60,000 unit per year construction pace. At that point, we're producing so many units for the markets that we're serving that with an abundance of supply means that pricing will start coming down. And that's what we're working toward. But here's really the magic in that is that pricing starts coming down, not just for our own residents, it'd be for everyone in the market that we're serving because we're working on supply and demand. Most apartment developers work to try to provide more affordable housing by getting government grants and benefits and things like that. But it doesn't really work long term because if you did that, you would have to take so much money out of the rest of the economy because the housing is such a large part that the rest of the economy would basically fall apart trying to support housing. And so the only way we can do this sustainably is by rising up production and driving down those construction costs. But how do we even do that? I'll give you some sense to that.
Hmm.
See, the world of construction has been stagnant for the last 60 years. Other industries like manufacturing has improved labor productivity by 760%. So if we take some lessons from them and apply it into our own industry, that's when we start to see success. And today we're achieving about a 20 to 30% reduction in those construction costs already. One of the big challenges that construction faces is it's very segmented. Instead of having everyone in one company work on something, you've got a different company that's your plumber, you're a different company that's electrician, excavation, so on and so forth. Imagine for a moment if a construction company were to produce a car. You'd have a different person, a different company installing the windshield, a different company installing the door, and a different company installing the wheel. The wheel company, they would call you up one day and say, "Hey, I'm so sorry. I got delayed on another project. I can't get out to your site for another 2 weeks." You'd be shut down.
Hmm.
And see, the world of manufacturing looks at us and says, "You're crazy." How we respond? That's the way it's always been done.
Hmm.
But here at our company, that's not good enough. And we're working to change that.
Is that what's most different about Norhart? Is this emphasis on doing things differently and not accepting how things have always been?
Yeah,
Is that
I would say that's the core of it,
that's
is
core principle?
hiring the very best. We've got, like, yeah, we our acceptance ratio is 0.4%. That's
Wow.
something like 100 times better than the average. It's crazy. But you get great people on board, and then what you do is you bring all the work under one roof, so we control the whole process, like a lot like Amazon has done.
Mm-hmm.
And then you partner with people like Toyota that revolutionize manufacturing, bring their experts in here and start applying the lessons they've learned. And then you work to solve those 10,000 little problems. And that's how you do it. It's quite simple. Anyone could do it.
Mike, when you wake up 10 years from now with Norhart, what does it look like?
In 10 years, that's when we dream to be at 192,000 units, producing about 60,000 units per year. And I think that's the sort of level that we're having meaningful impact on housing supply and therefore housing pricing for everyone in the markets that we serve.
Are we on a precipice of change with housing? We're seeing the wage gaps in the economy. We're seeing massive gaps happening. Are you guys feeling a specific gap in the housing market? Are we on a massive change happening right now as the pandemic's in the rearview mirror, the economy is what it is, the world is shifting? Talk to me about what your industry looks like and housing industry looks like globally as well as in America, and what you guys are seeing right in the middle of that.
Yeah, there is a huge shift going on right now. Many people don't even know it's happening.
Mhm.
But what happened after the pandemic, we saw supply chain hits and all this stuff. This wave came through. Then we saw inflation hit, another wave. And then after that was the Fed raising interest rates. That's the next wave. And then the wave that followed after that is because you have the rise in interest rates, it means that new housing projects, especially apartments, no longer make financial sense. So the amount of new apartment construction is falling massively right now. In fact, it's dropping by about 70% in the past year. There's
Wow.
some major developers that are entirely pencils down right now. It's shocking to see. And what's going to happen is that in 2 to 3 years, when those properties were supposed to come online with that additional supply, it no longer will be that way.
Mm.
And with that lack of new supply and still this ever growing US demand for housing, there's a demand and supply imbalance that over the next couple of years is going to have a negative impact on pricing for people.
Mm-hmm. Mike, thanks for jumping into the lab with me here today. We got a few minutes just to wrap up. Was there anything that I did not ask you, that we did not talk about, that you want to ensure the audience knows about, is aware of? Anything you want to promote, plug? Now is this moment for you to utilize that time to put out plug for Norhart, for Mike, for anything you want to talk about right now.
Awesome. Yeah. The way you can come learn more about us is simply visiting our website. That's norhart.com. It's norhart.com. One interesting thing there is we now are offering investments that people can actually invest into. We're offering a 10% rate of return for locking in money between 6 months and 5 years. We didn't even talk about this world of wanting to disrupt banking a little bit, but that's been our foray into that. But I would say on top of that, though, we've got a show called Zero to Unicorn, and it's about people who want to change the world. One of my favorite guests was Michael Usland. He's the originator and the executive producer of Batman. In fact, he was able to scrape a few investors together when he was young to buy the movie rights to Batman. And he thought for sure the studios would love this idea, except they didn't. Everyone slammed the door in his face and said no. They said that nobody wanted to see a dark and serious Batman movie. But Michael believed in that. And it took him 10 years 10 years of rejection to finally getting it accepted and making the Batman movies a reality. And now he's really the father of the modern superhero movie. He's doing some incredible stuff. But yeah, come check out the show Zero to Unicorn to see some incredible guests yourself.
Go grab a little bit of water there, Mike. So Zero to Unicorn, Mike Kaeding got a very clearly a pretty cool podcast that I think we're gonna. I'm definitely a Batman fan. I'm all about Batman. But if I was to Batman, Spider-Man, I don't know. I'm on the. So are you a Marvel guy or DC guy?
Oh, I love Spider-Man, but I treat them both equally.
Yes.
Wow.
We're gonna.
Perfect time to lose my voice.
Mike is losing on the air here, and we're trying to keep him together as he's grabbing a sip of water. We're going to be walking Mike out of here in the lab here in just a quick second. Mike, I appreciate you jumping in, man. I thoroughly enjoyed the chat. I hope you were as entertained and as informed as I was.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is super fun. You're like no host I'm used to seeing.
Of course, because I got the construction jersey on, and I'm trying.
That's the moment I knew.
Exactly. I knew that. Yeah. And I knew the moment that you were going to be you're 9 minutes late. You're like the guest that I love to have because I can have fun with them. I can roast them. It just sets the tone for the rest of the show. And of course, I say that all teasing aside. But Mike, I'm going to just put you back in the green room for a quick second so you can clear that cough. I'm going to say goodbye to the audience, and then I'm going to come back and walk you out. Okay? Awesome. Hang tight. We're going to do that. Pull that up there. Do that there. Put some music up on the screen. There we go. Hey, nation. What a fun one. Mike Kaeding joined me here. We talked Norhart. We talked disrupting the construction industry. We talked about a dad that got kidnapped while he was 12. Dial into the first, I don't know, probably about the 17, 18 minute mark where Mike talks about dad being kidnapped. Him and mom were at home. Didn't even know. Dad was kidnapped in Peru. Then he wakes up on a Monday after losing his father at a young age, the CEO of a multi-million-dollar construction company. So we just talked about that journey from there to there. Now Mike sits here in front of a massive global construction company building projects in the hundreds of millions of dollars. What we like to do in the lab, we like to offer up content that's inspiring. Oh, that one's dead. We like to offer up content that's inspiring. We like to offer up content that is motivating. And we like to offer up content that helps you be accountable. So I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go walk Mike out of the lab. You guys come back and see me tomorrow morning. Mornings in the lab with Keith and Nicole. We drop here. We stream on LinkedIn, YouTube, X, all over the planet. And like you heard me say at the start, if you want to partner, if you want to get your message out there, you want to create some great content, I'm doing it every single day. I invite you to join me in the lab. Come chat with myself and Nicole. Come create some good stuff. We'll put it out there. Get your message out there. You control the narrative, and we'll rock and roll together. All right. See you guys tomorrow. Mornings in the lab. Keith Billis. I'm out of here.